Good afternoon, everyone. Now Valparaiso. Massive fires in Chile. We've seen the massive fires in Australia. Wonder if they could be on a drought cycle. Up and down, dry, wet, dry, wet. It's called the IPO. When it goes positive, there's drought. Namibia, same thing. We can map it out. We know where the drought cycle is. Wet, dry, wet, dry. I wonder if it has anything to do with solar activity. What are the scariest things that you think about that could devastate your retirement savings today? The Chinese trade war, stock market crash, the Fed losing control of the overnight repo market, a clear sign that there's trouble ahead, gold sitting at 6-year highs. And isn't it time to think about gold and silver as a hedge against a full-blown market crash? Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer, where you work directly with an owner and avoid paying absurd broker fees. Call today or request a free investment kit. The link's in the description box below. PatriotGoldGroup.com. Now, at first glance, the appearance of this headline here would be like, wow, another massive wildfire. Yeah, but most of these were started by arson in the high wind, and it's not climate change, it's not CO2, it's not you, it's arsonists. And then we're following the story here in Australia, the massive wildfires. It looks like there's a lot of rain currently, so hopefully that'll help dissipate these fires. But as you can see, the massive amount of smoke coming out, clogging Sydney. And everything's always blamed on climate change for this. But these images here off the beach prior and during the fire, wow, impressive to say the least. Scary in another word. But if you look at all the road closures coming out of Sydney during these fires, there are only 2 exit routes out. Now this gives you the option of to bug in, but you better have some masks ready, because obviously in the middle of the city it's not going to burn, but it'll be smoky as can be. Or you can take your chances on the road with everybody else, and if you break down, you're going to have a more difficult time in your car trying to keep that smoke out than you would have in your home. So, situations like this, be very careful about bugging out. But needless to say, nobody's talking about the cycles of drought. It's always just got to be CO2, it must be you, it must be bad people causing climate change. But look, when we go back the last 1,500 years, we can start to see patterns in Wheeler's drought clock. Because I was really fascinated by the cyclic pattern in agriculture in Australia, I dug up and found this historical reconstruction unveils the risk of mass mortality of ecosystems collapsed during Pancontinental megadrought. And I said, wow, what's the bottom left there? 1891 and 1902, guess what? Our solar activity is back to 1901 again. Do you think there'd be any match? Mega drought, then as well, drought now again, mega drought, same exact low solar activity. Any correlation? I'll let you figure it out. But what has been mapped over the last 1,000 years is this thing called the IPO, and it's atmospheric oscillation that cloud bands and cells move into different places, causing either, guess it, more rainfall or more drought on a cycle. And we can look at it from the last 1,000 years, and it's a little difficult to look at, so let's wide it out here a bit. Whenever it goes above the line, it goes into drought. When it's below the line, it's really wet. And since we are at 2020, this is off the chart a little bit, but it's trended back upward. Now, if you take a look at the peak, say circa 1999 up to 2000, that's a real high peak. We have to go all the way back to somewhere around 1550 to find something similar in drought intensity. Because, we see a lot of pictures of the smoke, but what do the fires look like underneath the smoke? It's the exact same image as above with all the smoke, but you're able to penetrate through that smoke and get a glimpse at the fires here with different radar. Interesting look to see how much fire actually creates that much smoke. Again, blamed on climate change. But nobody's looking here at this Australia-New Zealand drought atlas. Even just going back to 1500, the last 500 years, we find the same thing. We start to see these cyclic patterns and low solar activity and drought status in Australia. Then I'll wide that out again here. 1896 to 1910, the top middle is exactly where we are with low solar activity back to 1901 again. And look, we're getting droughts. Nobody's seeing this correlation because nobody wants to, because it's too inconvenient with the global warming narrative and the tax asking handout basket that they're trying to get this global CO2 tax passed. Positive IPO means drought. And another beautiful image here, Findler's Ridge. I love huge contours from the air. Now that would be an incredibly fun day trip, walking that ridge there. Yeah, day well spent. And what I wanted to try to connect here, since we're talking about the same 100 so years of time taking us back to 1901, the drought indices in Namibia, because obviously both these countries are in the Southern Hemisphere, and are they running on the same oscillation and drought cycle should be the question, versus is it CO2? Because this graphic here is the opposite. The lower it goes, below the 0 point on the SPI, the more drought it becomes. So the lower that is below the line, the more drought indice there is on this. So all they did was go back in Windhoek in Namibia over the last 100 years, and here's their analysis on where it's going to dry when it goes back into drought again. They've already mapped it out. So you would expect that dark black region to be the driest again when we come into another cycle here of drought in that country. It should not be shocking. So what I try to do is line up solar activity going back as well to the turn of the last century. The yellow arrows I put in there myself, and I just wanted to see, all right, at the bottom of these droughts here in Namibia, where does it sit on the solar cycle activity? And you can see a lot of it's in the descent or the very bottom of the 11-year cycle. There's only one that doesn't fit that pattern, but you see everything else when it's sliding off or into the low, that's when we get the drought. And guess what? Namibia's back into a drought. Imagine that. No way. 2 places, solar activity, 2 droughts, 2 continents. Pay your CO2 tax. Quit asking questions. So I dug this out here, documentary and data of past droughts. This is focused on Southern Africa. I put a couple arrows and boxes in there. And again, this chart's going back to the beginning of the last century at the year 1900. So what we're looking at, obviously, is the black bar on the left. It should get that much more intense with the drought based on solar activity. And on the far right, where the arrow is, you can see the little bit of downturn now. And I thought, well, that's incredibly difficult to see. Why should I put you through that? Let's get some magnifying glass on this thing. Now, the area of study, obviously, you can see the map over there on the right, encompassing Southern Africa. So they get a good, indication of areas east, west, south of Southern Africa, what happens during these drought cycles. And if you go to the far left, that's what's indicated for the solar activity of what's coming in the drought cycle intensifying in Southern Africa. And we're far over on the right side in our present era. So it looks like the amount of drought could double, maybe a little more in intensity as we move forward through the next few years in Southern Africa. And then we have 2 continents in a drought cycle based on solar activity. Ouch. It's not you, it's not CO2, it's the Sun Limited Edition design. 4 days left. Because the climate debate always wants to split hairs, we wanted to split colors. Notice the design change. And the link to Adapt 2030 merch is in the description box below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video.